The Zoroth Empire had ruled the outer spiral for centuries. Their fleets had crushed hundreds of worlds. Their name was enough to make entire star systems surrender without a fight. But when they set their eyes on the human colonies along the Orion Arm, something felt different. Earth was far from the richest or largest world in the galaxy. Yet their last message to the Zoroth Council carried no fear. It carried a warning, short and clear. It said, "Leave our colonies alone, or face consequences." In the grand chamber of the Zoroth capital, alien nobles laughed. Their laughter echoed through the tall crystal pillars. They called Earth primitive, weak, a young race that had barely touched the stars. To them, the ultimatum was amusing, a sign that humans did not understand their place in the galaxy. The Zoroth Emperor himself waved a clawed hand and said, "They are ants before giants, we will crush them," the council agreed. And the order was given to send the 9th Imperial Fleet, the most feared armada in their history, but far away, in the shadows of asteroid belts and hidden under the icy oceans of secret worlds. Humans were not laughing. They had been watching, listening, planning. Their fleets were not paraded through space like the Zoroth ships. They were ghosts, unseen, silent, armed with weapons the galaxy had never imagined. The Terran Defense Network had prepared for this day for decades, and now the trap was almost ready. Admiral Sarah Cade stood in the command center of the Terran flagship, her eyes fixed on the glowing star map. Red points of light marked the expected path of the Zoroth 9th Fleet. Her officers worked in silence. The air was heavy with tension. She knew the enemy would never turn back. Their pride would not allow it. She also knew they had no idea what waited for them in the dark on Earth. The last preparations were underway. Deep beneath the surface, in bunkers that stretched for miles, engineers worked on final weapon calibrations. The railgun towers were being loaded, missile silos primed, and the great warships hidden in deep space began to move into position. Each crew knew this could be the battle that defined humanity's place among the stars. Every hand was steady, every voice calm. Across the colonies, the people listened to the news. Some were afraid, others angry. But all understood that this was no longer about one fleet or one empire. This was about survival. Old rivalries between human nations vanished overnight. Every government pledged ships, soldiers, and resources to the defense. Children watched their parents don uniforms. Factories worked without pause, producing armor, drones, and ammunition. Meanwhile, the Zoroth 9th Fleet was gathering in their forward base. 800 warships, from massive dreadnoughts the size of cities to fast-strike craft that could burn through the skies of a world in seconds. In the fleet's grand hall, Admiral Korth, a veteran of 30 campaigns, addressed his captains, his voice full of confidence. He spoke of honor, glory, and the humiliation of Earth. The alien officers roared in approval, convinced that the coming war would be swift. Yet, among them, a few felt uneasy. The humans' final message was too calm, too certain. It lacked the desperate pleas most races made before defeat. One junior officer dared to suggest caution, but was quickly silenced by the admiral, who reminded them that no race had ever stood against the 9th Fleet and lived. The day of departure came. The armada's engines lit up the void, each warship shimmering under the light of a nearby star. They moved in perfect formation, like a metal storm crossing the Black Sea of space. Civilian transport ships left the area, carrying messages of confidence to the Empire's homeworld. No one believed Earth could last more than a week, but on the edge of known space, in a region marked on most maps as the Dead Zone, a different fleet waited. Human ships cloaked in a darkness that swallowed light. Their hulls absorbed sensor waves, leaving no trace from a distance. They were part of the void itself. The crews waited in silence, engines cold, weapons armed, each one knowing that the moment the Zoroth fleet entered the trap, history would change. Inside the Terran flagship, Admiral Cade received the latest report. Scouts hidden in asteroid shadows had confirmed the alien fleet's approach. They were on schedule. She gave the order to hold fire, to let the enemy come deeper. the longer they traveled into the dead zone. The fewer escape routes they would have. On the Zorith Bridge, Admiral Korth studied his maps, unaware that the very space around him was a cage. He spoke to his officers about the glory of conquest, the ease of their mission, and the celebration that would follow when they returned with Earth's leaders in chains. He did not see the faint distortions in the void, the ghost shapes that moved without sound. Back on Earth, the final broadcast to the galaxy was sent, a simple message recorded by the United Earth Council. "This is our last warning." It repeated once, then twice, then the channel went silent. No threats, no begging, just a promise. The Ninth Fleet ignored it, their course unchanged, their confidence unshaken. They believed they were the hunters, but in truth, they were already inside the jaws of a predator they did not understand. In the dark heart of the dead zone, the human fleet watched and waited. The trap was set, and there would be no escape. The last message from Earth had been sent, and the galaxy would soon learn why it should have been obeyed. The Ninth Fleet moved like a wall of steel and fire through the cold of space. Their ships stretched across thousands of kilometers, each one a fortress, each one a weapon built to crush entire worlds. The alien crews stood at their stations with pride, banners of the Zorith Empire displayed across their displays. The mission seemed simple to them. Arrive at Earth's colonies, destroy their defenses, and return with proof of victory. Admiral Korth sat in the high command chair of his flagship, the Bloodfang, a dreadnought that had led countless battles. Its hull was marked with the scars of wars fought across the spiral. His eyes glimmered with the certainty of triumph. To him, this was not a war. This was a demonstration of power, a reminder to the younger races of who ruled the galaxy. But as the fleet accelerated toward the dead zone, there were small signs of unease. Sensor officers reported occasional signal interference, brief flickers on the tactical screens, strange shadows at the edge of detection range. Each time, the readings vanished before a proper scan could be made. Some dismissed it as static from the dead zone's unstable space. Others felt a quiet tension settle in their stomachs. The journey through hyperspace was long. The Ninth Fleet had prepared entertainment halls, combat arenas, and feasts for the crews to keep morale high. Zorith warriors drank, laughed, and placed bets on how quickly the humans would surrender. A popular guess was less than 3 days. Yet one young lieutenant, Rallick, kept staring at his console, replaying the intercepted human message over and over. There was something about the voice, calm, steady, and almost certain. It didn't sound like prey facing its end. It sounded like a hunter inviting its target in. By the third day, the fleet had reached the threshold of the dead zone. The stars around them thinned until the view outside was nothing but a dark, endless void. No planets, no suns, only the silence of space. The dead zone was avoided by most civilizations. Its strange gravitational eddies disrupted navigation, and ancient derelicts from long-forgotten wars drifted here like the bones of giants. Admiral Korth gave the order to push through at full speed. They would emerge on the far side and be in striking range of Earth's forward colonies. As the fleet advanced, faint glimmers appeared in the dark, broken ships, their hulls split open, silent and lifeless. Many were alien designs unfamiliar to the Zorith, some so old they seemed to belong to no known race. On the bridge of the Bloodfang, navigation officers noticed something unsettling. The fleet's formation seemed to be shifting without orders. Small escort ships were drifting slightly out of position, then correcting course, then drifting again. Communications were crisp, but several smaller ships reported momentary drops in power. A possible systems glitch. Korth ordered his engineers to run checks, still confident nothing serious could challenge them. Far away but watching every move, the Terran Shadow Fleet moved with precision. Human stealth ships, coated in void-absorbing armor, were mirroring the Ninth Fleet's formation from just beyond sensor range. Advanced AI warfare programs were already disrupting Zorith navigation systems, causing the small but dangerous errors that would open gaps for attack later. Every movement of the alien fleet was being recorded and analyzed in real time in the human flagship TN's Vengeance. Admiral Sarah Cade observed the alien formation on her display. She noted how the Zorath Dreadnoughts were shielded by heavy cruisers, how their fighter wings patrolled in predictable arcs. Her lips curved slightly. They were powerful, but predictable, and predictable enemies could be dismantled piece by piece. Her second-in-command asked if they should strike now, but Cade shook her head. Not yet. They have further to fall before they break. Inside the Ninth Fleet, the first real incident occurred. One of the escort frigates, Varrock's Pride, suddenly dropped out of formation. Its lights flickered. Then the entire ship went dark. Before the crew of the Bloodfang could hail it, the frigate simply vanished from sensors. No explosion, no wreckage, nothing. As if it had been erased from reality, the bridge fell silent for a moment. Then the Admiral ordered all ships to tighten formation and increase scanning sweeps. Some captains began to whisper to each other over private comms. Stories of human experiments with void phase weapons, devices that could slip matter into another dimension, but such things were rumors told in backroom bars. Not real technology, at least. That was what they believed until now. Still, Korth refused to slow. He believed speed was their shield. Hesitation would only embolden the humans. Press forward, he commanded. And the order echoed through the entire armada. The engines roared as the Ninth Fleet plunged deeper into the dead zone. Back in the Terran fleet, the first phase of the operation was marked complete. The missing frigate had been pulled into a human interdiction trap, captured without firing a single shot, its crew sedated and its systems stripped for intelligence. Cade's teams worked quickly and silently. No traces left behind. The aliens, unaware of how close human ships were, continued to advance, yet their path was already narrowing. Navigational anomalies were guiding them toward a specific corridor. Within the dead zone, a place the humans had chosen long ago as the perfect kill zone. High-density asteroid fields on either side and unstable warp currents behind them would make retreat impossible once they crossed a certain point. By the seventh day, the fleet was halfway through the void, but morale was no longer as strong as it had been. The disappearance of the Varrock's Pride still hung over them. Sensor interference was becoming more frequent, and strange bursts of static whispered across comms channels. Some claimed they heard words in the static, words in human language, short phrases like "we see you" and "turn back." The officers dismissed it as tricks of the void, but the younger crew members avoided looking out the windows into the dark, afraid of what they might see staring back. Admiral Korth continued to project confidence, delivering speeches about the glory that awaited them. Yet he privately increased the readiness level of the entire fleet, ordering weapons charged and shields at full power. He told himself it was caution, not fear, but deep inside, the silence of the dead zone was beginning to feel wrong. In the command center of the TN's Vengeance, Cade received the final confirmation from her scouts. The Ninth Fleet would cross the kill zone boundary within 2 hours. Her voice was calm as she gave the order to prepare all strike wings, power up the primary weapons, and maintain full cloak until her signal. The human fleet began to stir in, the darkness like predators ready to pounce. The Zorath Ninth Fleet moved unknowingly into the heart of the trap. Their banners still bright, their pride still high, believing they were the hunters, not realizing that the moment they crossed the invisible line, there would be no turning back. The jaws of Earth's vengeance were closing, and the galaxy was about to witness the beginning of a battle no one would forget. The Ninth Fleet drifted deeper into the dead zone, its vast formation a moving city of steel and fire in the darkness. The surrounding space was still and endless, no stars, no light, only the slow thrum of engines and the cold hum of power systems. For the Zorath crews, the first few days inside had been unsettling, but now the quiet was becoming oppressive, as if the void itself was waiting for something. Admiral Korth stood on the bridge of the Bloodfang, his eyes scanning the tactical displays. The crew reported no threats, no enemy contacts. Nothing but the endless static of the void, yet he could not shake the feeling that something unseen was moving with them. His instincts, sharpened by decades of warfare, whispered that they were not alone. The unease deepened when a second escort frigate, Razor Claw, failed to respond to a routine systems check. The Bloodfang scanners caught it for a moment, lights flickering. Hull drifting slightly off course then, like the Vorok's Pride before it. It simply vanished, no explosion. No distress call, just gone. The surrounding ships scanned the area with every frequency they had, but there was no trace, not even debris. Some officers suggested turning back, but Korth silenced them with a glare. "We are the Ninth Fleet," he growled. "No phantom in the dark will make us retreat." His voice carried authority, but in the corners of the bridge, whispered fears began to spread. In the human flagship TN's Vengeance, Admiral Sarah Cade watched the live feed from stealth drones, hidden among the drifting debris fields. The Razor Claw was now secured inside one of their carrier bays, its crew in stasis, its databases being copied line by line. The humans didn't just want victory. They wanted to understand the Zurath's entire war machine. Her voice was calm as she gave new orders. Phase 2 Shadow Assault, instantly. Small Terran strike craft, sleek, black, and nearly invisible, slipped from the hulls of their carriers. They moved like sharks, gliding silently between the alien warships, each one armed with pulse disruptors and magnetic breaching pods. Back in the Ninth Fleet, the first attacks came without warning. A Zorath destroyer's lights flickered, then its main weapons went offline. Crew members scrambled to restore power, but before they could, a sudden blast tore through its engine core. The ship spun out of formation, venting plasma. Still, no enemy ship appeared on scanners. It was as if the destroyer had been struck by the void itself. Then it happened again and again. In different corners of the formation, one ship after another suffered sudden power failures. Precise hits that crippled engines, tore through shield emitters, or detonated ammunition bays. The Zorath responded with fury, firing blind into the darkness, their energy blasts lighting the void for brief moments, but hitting nothing inside the alien ships. Fear was growing. Crew members spoke of seeing shadows move past viewports, shapes that vanished when they turned to look. Some claimed to hear faint tapping on the outer hulls. Others swore they saw human faces in the static of their comm screens. Korth dismissed these as hallucinations caused by stress, but deep down, he knew this was no accident. The humans were here, in the Terran strike wings. The pilots moved with ruthless precision. Every attack was planned to break the Zorath formation. Without triggering mass retreat, they wanted the fleet to keep moving deeper into the exact center of the kill zone. From there, no ship would escape. On the third day inside the dead zone, the Zorath fleet entered a narrow corridor between two massive asteroid fields. The rocks were ancient, drifting slowly, their surfaces covered in the wreckage of long-dead ships. Korth ordered shields to maximum, wary of collisions. But what he didn't know was that the humans had spent years seeding this corridor with hidden mines and sensor jammers. The first mine detonated beneath a Zorath cruiser, tearing it apart in a silent flash. The shockwave rattled nearby ships, and then the humans struck again. This time they revealed themselves. The TNS Vengeance appeared in the distance, a vast black silhouette against the emptiness. Its armor shifted and shimmered like liquid metal, its profile unlike any warship in the galaxy. Massive railgun batteries rotated into position, its forward cannon glowing with an eerie blue light. The moment the Zorath saw it, their comm channels erupted with disbelief. This was not a ship they recognized from any intelligence database. Before they could react, the Vengeance fired. A beam of blue-white light erupted from its main cannon, not exploding, but slicing through space itself. It passed straight through a Zorath Dreadnought, and when the beam faded, the Dreadnought was simply gone, erased, leaving only a void where it had been. The Ninth Fleet froze in shock, their commanders shouting orders, their crews scrambling. But in the confusion, more human warships appeared, flickering into view, then vanishing again. Their weapons cutting through Zoroth armor like paper, smaller. Terran ships darted in close, planting magnetic charges on alien hulls. Vanishing before counterfire could lock onto them, panic began to take hold. The Zoroth's perfect formation collapsed as captains tried to dodge incoming fire or flee from invisible attackers. Korth roared over the comms, ordering them to regroup and counterattack. But his own sensors were failing, flooded with false readings. Every direction showed dozens of phantom human ships. Meanwhile, the humans pressed their advantage, targeting communication relays and navigation arrays. The more disoriented the Ninth Fleet became, the easier the kill would be. One by one, alien ships were disabled, their engines dead, their weapons offline on the bridge of the Vengeance. Admiral Cade watched the battle unfold with cold focus. "Do not destroy them all," she ordered. "Let the fear spread. Let them understand." Her officers nodded, already adjusting targeting protocols. In the chaos, a chilling realization spread through the Zoroth crews. This wasn't a battle. It was a hunt. The humans were not rushing to destroy them. They were taking their time, dismantling them piece by piece, making sure every survivor knew exactly who held the power. By the time the Ninth Fleet reached the far end of the corridor, they had lost nearly a quarter of their strength. The survivors were shaken, confused, and terrified. Yet Korth still refused to retreat, convinced that if they could break through to the open space ahead, they might regroup and strike back. What he didn't know was that the open space ahead was exactly where the humans wanted them to go, the heart of the kill zone, where the full Terran fleet was waiting, silent, patient, and ready to finish what had begun. The hunt had only just started, and the Ninth Fleet had no idea how much further they had to fall. The wreckage of the Bloodfang still drifted in the void, its shattered hull scattering across the black as faint glimmers of molten metal cooled into silence. The destruction of the Ninth Fleet's flagship should have been the end of the battle. But Admiral Sarah Cade knew it was only the midpoint. The kill zone was not just a trap, it was a crucible. And the remaining Zoroth ships were about to be burned down to their last spark. The alien fleet was in chaos, formations broken, comms flooded with conflicting orders. Some captains screamed for a counterattack. Others begged for a retreat, and more still fell into stunned silence. Their ships drifting without coordination, their banners dim. What had been the most feared fleet in the galaxy only hours ago now looked like a pack of predators caught in a storm they could not control. Cade's voice was steady as she addressed her fleet. "They have no leader, no cohesion, and no way out. Strike in waves. Take their engines first, then their weapons. Leave them blind. Leave them still." The human fleet moved instantly, warships decloaking in precise intervals, hitting targets with devastating accuracy, then disappearing again into the shadows. A Zoroth heavy cruiser, Claw of Dawn, tried to cover a retreating wing of destroyers, its cannons blazing in wide arcs. But 3 Terran frigates appeared directly beneath it, launching EMP torpedoes that wrapped the alien ship in a blinding blue pulse. The Claw of Dawn went dark, its lights extinguished, engines dead, left adrift like a carcass across the battlefield. Small Terran strike craft swarmed in coordinated packs, each pilot moving with machine-like precision. Their railguns peppered enemy hulls in patterns that crippled systems, rather than blowing ships apart. The humans didn't waste firepower. They chose exactly which pieces of the Zoroth war machine to rip away. In the belly of the TNS Vengeance, boarding teams prepared for the next phase. The hangar was alive with activity as squads advanced. Combat armor checked weapons and synchronized their exosuit systems. Their mission was not to kill but to capture. Human intelligence wanted Zoroth command codes, weapon schematics, and any sign of future fleet deployments. The first boarding operation hit the Steel Fang, a battlecruiser still trying to rally nearby ships. Human breaching pods punched through the hull in seconds, cutting through the alien corridors like a knife through paper. Within minutes, The bridge was under Terran control. Its crew bound, the captain snarling but powerless as his codes were. Ripped from the ship's mainframe, elsewhere, Zoroth resistance grew more desperate. In pockets of the fleet, alien captains fought like cornered animals, pushing their ships into suicidal ramming runs. One destroyer managed to collide with a human corvette, tearing both vessels apart. But these moments of defiance did nothing to change the inevitable. The humans had the momentum, the precision, and the patience. Admiral Cade's strategy remained the same. She would not end the battle in one crushing blow. She wanted the survivors to carry the story back to the galaxy. She wanted whispers of the Terran fleet's precision, its cold patience, and its unstoppable advance to spread faster than any propaganda could. Fear was the most efficient weapon in the Zoroth ranks. Captain Rallock, the young officer who had doubted this mission from the start, found himself in command of a crippled escort. His dreadnought had been destroyed earlier in the battle, and he had taken refuge on this smaller vessel. He watched the humans move with perfect coordination, their ships almost seeming to anticipate every move his fleet made. "They're not just fighting us," he muttered to his second officer. "They're studying us." Kaz's fleet tightened the noose. Now her ships began cycling their weapons to strike from all vectors at once. Missiles came from above, railgun slugs from the sides, beam cannons from dead ahead. The Zoroth defensive grids were overwhelmed, their point defense systems firing in all directions, but never catching enough to protect them. The Talon's Wrath, one of the last operational Zoroth carriers, tried to launch its fighter wings, but half the craft were destroyed on launch by invisible fire. The rest were herded toward an asteroid cluster, where they vanished, captured by cloaked Terran corvettes waiting in the shadows. In the central sector of the kill zone, the Vengeance moved like a slow, uncheckable predator. Rail batteries hammering any Zoroth ship foolish enough to show a clean target. Its main cannon glowed faintly, ready but not yet fired again. Cade knew the psychological weight of holding that weapon in reserve, letting the enemy dread its next shot. By now, more than half of the 9th Fleet was disabled, their engines cold, their weapons useless, and their crews trapped aboard small clusters of still operational ships huddled together, trying to cover each other's flanks. But the humans moved in with surgical precision, taking one cluster at a time, cutting it apart like meat from bone. Rallock's ship took a glancing hit that ripped through its side compartments. Alarm screamed, bulkheads sealed, and he stared out into the void where the human fleet shimmered in and out of existence. "They could finish us in minutes," he said quietly, "but they're choosing not to." His second officer asked why, and Rallock answered with the cold truth: because fear lasts longer than fire on the Vengeance. Admiral Cade received a final status update. 70% of the 9th Fleet was disabled, 20% destroyed, and the remaining 10% trying to flee toward the far edge of the dead zone. She gave the order for pursuit, not to wipe them out, but to shadow them, striking whenever they tried to regroup, never letting them feel safe. The battle had become more than a military engagement. It was a lesson, a statement to the galaxy that the humans would not only defend their worlds, but would do so with precision, patience, and an efficiency that no empire could match. As the last hours of the battle dragged on, the Zoroth survivors finally broke, their coms filled with pleas for mercy. Some offered surrender, others begged for safe passage. Cade accepted every surrender, knowing those prisoners would be more dangerous to the Zoroth Empire alive than dead, each one a witness to the nightmare they had faced. When the humans finally withdrew to regroup and secure their prizes, the once mighty 9th Fleet was nothing more than drifting wreckage, broken ships and silenced guns. The void was littered with the remains of Zoroth pride, and the shadows of the dead zone hid the silent human warships that had brought them to ruin. Far away, on neutral worlds and within enemy councils, rumors would spread of ships that appeared from nowhere, of weapons that erased entire dreadnoughts, of an enemy that fought without rage, without mercy, and without mistakes. The galaxy would remember the 9th Fleet, but not for its victories. It would remember it as the day the hunters became the hunted, and the name Earth became something to fear. The dead zone was silent again, but it was not the same silence the Ninth Fleet had entered. Now the void carried the ghosts of wreckage, the drifting hulks of Zorath warships, and the fading signals of their once proud banners. The battle was over, yet the humans did not celebrate. Admiral Sarah Cade knew the fight was only half won. Her fleet moved methodically among the shattered remains, cloaked corvettes slipping close to disable the last of the drifting enemy ships. Boarding teams hopping from wreck to wreck, stripping data cores, seizing weapons, and securing prisoners. Every disabled Zorath vessel was a trove of intelligence, and Cade intended to squeeze every drop of information before sending them back to their empire. For the Zorath survivors, the nightmare was not over. Those who had been captured were taken aboard vast Terran carriers. The inside of these ships felt less like prisons and more like sealed laboratories. Prisoners were scanned, interviewed, and isolated, their coms cut, their every word recorded. The humans didn't shout or threaten, they simply watched every interaction, part of a greater puzzle. Captain Ralak sat in a holding cell aboard the TNS Dominion, the second largest ship in the Terran fleet. He had expected cruelty or arrogance from the humans, but instead they treated him with a cold professionalism. When an officer entered to question him, she did not ask about troop numbers or weapons first. Instead she asked, "Why did your fleet ignore the warning?" The question hit him harder than he expected, because deep down, he didn't know the answer. Meanwhile, in the command center of the Vengeance, Cade's officers reviewed the data gathered from the wrecks. A holographic map displayed the Ninth Fleet's original deployment and all the changes during the battle. They didn't adapt quickly enough, her tactical chief noted. Too rigid, too confident. Cade nodded. That's how you break an empire, you make them believe their old ways still work, then pull the ground out from under them. But beyond the victory, another problem loomed. The destruction of the Ninth Fleet would not end the Zorath threat. In fact, it would provoke them. She knew the Emperor would not admit defeat quietly. There would be retaliation. But now the galaxy had seen what humanity could do, and that meant the political battlefield would be as important as the military one. On neutral worlds, the news was already spreading. Traders whispered of a battle where humans erased ships from existence. Smugglers carried tales of a fleet that moved like shadows, striking without warning in the distant halls of alien governments. Leaders began to question whether siding with the Zorath was worth the risk. Back in the dead zone, the last Zorath ships capable of movement tried to flee, engines burning hot as they limped toward the nearest warp point. Cade ordered 2 strike groups to follow them, not to destroy them outright, but to keep the fear alive. Every time the fleeing ships thought they had escaped, Terran vessels would appear for just a moment, fire a precision shot to cripple a weapon or take down a shield, then vanish again. The survivors began to expect the attacks, flinching even when nothing appeared. One of those fleeing ships, the Iron Maw, carried a surviving Commodore who had once boasted that the Ninth Fleet could crush any force in the Farking galaxy. Now he sat pale and trembling in his command chair, watching his crew jump at shadows. He finally gave the order to transmit a warning to the Zorath capital. Do not follow us. Do not come here. The humans own the dead zone. In Cade's war room, the captured Zorath command logs were decrypted, revealing something valuable: deployment schedules for other Imperial fleets, details of resource convoys, and the locations of forward supply bases. Her staff studied them like hunters marking the trails of prey. The war had entered a new phase, and now Earth knew where to strike next. But Cade was careful. She would not overreach. The purpose of this battle was not to annihilate the Zorath Empire in one blow. It was to set the tone for the future. The humans had shown they could match and surpass the strongest fleet the Empire could send. Now they would force the Zorath into a defensive posture, make them hesitate before every move. That night, though night had no meaning in the void, the Terran fleet remained cloaked in the dead zone, running silent, letting the last whispers of the battle drift into the wider galaxy. The wreckage was left floating, a monument to arrogance, and a warning to any who might think to test Earth. Aboard the Vengeance, Cade stood before the viewing pane. Staring at the cold debris field, her second-in-command approached. "The last prisoners are secure, Admiral. And all surviving enemy vessels have been tracked outside the perimeter." She nodded, then gave her next command. "Transmit the message." The transmission was simple. Broadcast across secure channels to every major power in the known systems. It contained no threats, no boasting, only a single line over the image of the drifting Ninth Fleet wrecks. "This is what happens when you ignore Earth's final warning." Across the galaxy, reactions varied. In the Zorath capital, the Emperor smashed his ceremonial staff in rage, demanding a new fleet be assembled. In the neutral trade hubs, merchants rerouted their shipments to avoid any risk of crossing Terran patrols. And on the outer colonies of other empires, young officers whispered with something between fear and admiration. On the Dominion, Captain Relic sat in silence, thinking of the battle, of the calm human voices over the comms, of the way they dismantled the fleet without ever losing control. He began to understand that this was not just about war, it was about psychology, about making every opponent believe that when they faced humans, they had already lost. For the Terran crews, there was no cheering when the orders came to leave the dead zone. The victory was complete, but they knew this was only the beginning. Cade's fleet slipped away as silently as it had come, their engines leaving no trace. The dead zone returned to its eerie stillness, the wrecks drifting like shadows in an endless night. And in that silence, the message remained, written not in words, but in the absence of the Ninth Fleet, a warning. To every ruler, every admiral, and every would-be conqueror in the galaxy, Earth had risen. Earth would not be ignored, and those who failed to understand that truth would never return. In the Zorath capital, the Grand Council chamber had never been so silent. The massive hall, normally filled with the hum of political debate and the hiss of translators, was now an echoing void. The Emperor sat on his obsidian throne, claws gripping the armrests so tightly the stone groaned under the pressure. Before him floated the live holographic report, and in its center spun the image that was spreading across the galaxy like a plague and endless field of wreckage. The remains of the Ninth Fleet. No survivors had returned to give speeches of glory. No triumphant war songs were sung. And the fleet's flagship, the Bloodfang, was gone without trace. Even the warp beacons it had carried were missing. The only proof of the Ninth Fleet's existence now lay in the haunting images, collected by neutral traders foolish enough to skirt the edge of the dead zone. The Emperor's ministers stood in a line, each trying to keep their heads low. No one wanted to be the first to speak. The Emperor finally broke the silence, his voice low but carrying a weight that froze the air. 800 warships, he said, our finest, our most feared. And they are gone. No one dared to answer, because every one of them knew the truth. This was not just a defeat, it was a message. That message was being read across the galaxy, in the markets of the neutral trade hubs. Smugglers and merchants exchanged whispers. "The humans don't fight like anyone else," one said over a cup of steaming Curran brew. "They don't charge in screaming, they wait in the dark. And when they move, you're already dead, in the private war councils of other empires." Admirals replayed every fragment of sensor data they could find. Some dismissed the human victory as luck. Others saw it for what it was, a sign of a new balance of power. Far from the Zorath capital, in a quiet orbital station above Mars, Admiral Sarah Cade stood before the United Earth Council. She had just returned from the dead zone with her fleet. Her uniform was spotless, her voice calm, but the air in the chamber was electric. Every member of the council leaned forward, hanging on her every word. "The Ninth Fleet is gone," she said plainly, "and the Zorath will not be the same." After this, some councilors wanted to push the advantage immediately, to strike deep into Zorath territory before they could regroup. But Cade raised her hand. "No," she said. We've shown the galaxy what we can do. Now we let that fear spread. Let them doubt every plan. Let them wonder if we're already watching them." She explained that the psychological victory was just as valuable as the physical one, and that striking too soon would turn fear into defiance. Meanwhile, among the survivors of the Ninth Fleet, those few taken prisoner in the dead zone had been scattered among secure Terran installations. They were not tortured or mistreated, but every moment of their captivity was designed to unsettle them. They were shown images of Earth's industrial worlds, the endless rows of shipyards, the moon-sized dry docks where new warships were being born. They were told, without arrogance, that these were only a fraction of humanity's strength. One of those prisoners, Captain Rallick, sat in a quiet cell on Titan Station. He had stopped trying to plan an escape. Instead, he found himself replaying the battle over and over in his mind, trying to find the moment where the Ninth Fleet could have turned the tide. But every scenario ended the same way, with the humans still in control. He began to understand the deeper truth, that the Terrans hadn't just outgunned them. They had outhot them at every turn on neutral planets. Recruitment offices for local defense fleets saw an unusual trend: young aliens volunteering to train with human officers, hoping to learn the same discipline and precision that had broken the Ninth Fleet. Some even spoke openly of defecting to Earth service, believing that it was better to be an ally to such a force than an enemy. The Zorith Empire, however, was not idle. In the dark chambers beneath the capital, war planners gathered around massive star maps, plotting countermeasures. Their scientists demanded to know how the humans had erased entire ships without leaving debris. Their admirals demanded to know how their cloaked scouts had been tracked so easily. Yet every answer they found raised more questions, and every test revealed how far behind they truly were. Back in the Terran command archives, the intelligence teams continued to sift through the captured Zorith data. Among it were hints of other Imperial fleets stationed far from the core worlds, fleets that might be vulnerable to the same kind of trap. Cade studied these files with interest, already thinking of the next time the humans would emerge from the dark to remind the galaxy of their reach. But for now, the humans stayed quiet. Their fleets vanished back into deep space. No broadcasts, no threats, no visible troop movements. To the outside observer, it might have seemed like they had gone back to their own affairs. But in truth, they were moving unseen, redeploying ships, upgrading weapons, and building new strike groups designed for missions even more daring than the Dead Zone. Weeks later, a Zorith scout ship approached the Dead Zone under strict orders to gather proof of what had happened. It never made it back. Its last transmission was a grainy image of a massive black silhouette drifting in the void. No lights, no identification, just a silent predator watching. The signal cut off before the image could be cleared. Rumors of that image spread quickly. Some swore it was the Vengeance. Others claimed it was an entirely new ship, larger and more dangerous. The truth didn't matter. The fear was what mattered. In the minds of the galaxy, the Dead Zone had become Earth's territory, a place where their enemies vanished without trace. In the Zorith capital, the Emperor made a decision that would shape the next chapter of the war. He ordered the creation of the 10th Fleet, larger than the 9th, equipped with new experimental weapons and commanded by his most ruthless admiral. But deep in his mind, he knew that even this might not be enough, because somewhere out there, in the silent dark between stars, the humans were waiting. And if the 9th Fleet had taught the galaxy anything, it was this: when Earth said final warning, they meant it, and those who ignored it never returned. The galaxy had not been quiet since the fall of the 9th Fleet. Word of its destruction spread faster than any official announcement, carried by merchant freighters, smugglers, and intercepted transmissions. But unlike most battles, this one was not defined by the number of ships destroyed or the amount of territory won. It was defined by what was left unsaid. No one truly knew how the humans had done it. And that uncertainty was more dangerous than any weapon. The Zorith Empire, once so certain of its dominance, was now whispering in its own halls. Captains questioned orders. crew morale fractured, and even the Emperor's ministers could not hide their unease. It was not the loss of ships that haunted them, it was the knowledge that the humans had chosen when and how to end the fight, and could do so again. On Earth, there was no grand parade for the returning fleet. Admiral Sarah Cade had made sure of it. The Vengeance and its escorts slipped into orbit without ceremony, their crews returning to duty stations instead of basking in glory. To the Terran High Command, the victory was not an ending, but a signal, the first move in a much larger game. In the secure depths of the Terran Strategic Command Center, Cade stood before a darkened holotable, her staff gathered in silence. The air smelled faintly of ozone from the constant hum of active encryption systems. On the table floated the map of known space, dozens of markers indicating Zorath fleet positions, supply routes, and forward bases. These were the fruits of the intelligence seized from the wreckage of the Ninth Fleet. And every single one was now a potential target. Time is our weapon now, Cade said, her voice steady. The Zorath will rebuild, but they will do so looking over their shoulder, wondering if we are already there. She assigned new missions, not massive fleet battles, but surgical strikes, covert raids, sabotage runs that would never officially be traced back to Earth. The kind of warfare that made an enemy bleed without ever seeing the blade. The prisoners taken from the Ninth Fleet became part of this strategy. Not as bargaining chips, but as messengers, carefully released in stages back to Zorath-controlled worlds, each one carrying the memory of how the humans fought, how they dismantled the fleet piece by piece. No lies, no exaggeration, just the truth. And the truth was terrifying enough. In the Zorath capital, those returned prisoners were treated with suspicion, some accused of cowardice, others interrogated for weeks, but every one of them told the same story, of ships that appeared from nowhere, weapons that could erase dreadnoughts in a single strike, and crews who fought with an unshakable calm. The Emperor's advisors debated whether these tales were meant to sow fear or were genuine warnings, but the effect was the same. Paranoia spread far from the core worlds. In the shadowed corridors of neutral space stations, the power dynamic began to shift. Alien merchants who once avoided human trade lanes now sought them out, seeing protection where once they saw only a young, untested race. Smaller empires sent secret envoys to the Terran Council, offering alliances in exchange for technology or training. Cade was careful in her responses. She accepted some, rejected others, always with an eye on the greater picture. The humans could not overextend too soon, but they could make sure the galaxy understood one thing: Earth was no longer a minor player in the grand game. It was a force capable of shaping the board itself. Meanwhile, deep in the dead zone, the wreckage of the Ninth Fleet remained untouched, a graveyard in the dark. The Terrans had left it there deliberately, a warning to anyone foolish enough to enter. Cloaked patrol ships moved silently through the debris fields, watching, waiting, ensuring that the legend of the dead zone stayed alive. When a Zorath recon probe dared to enter, it lasted only minutes before its signal was cut. The last image it transmitted was a shadow in the distance, a shape that some claimed matched the Vengeance. Others believed it to be an entirely new class of Terran warship. The truth didn't matter. What mattered was that it confirmed the fear that the humans still held the dead zone. In the war rooms of the Zorath Empire, plans for the 10th Fleet were already underway. It would be larger, stronger, and armed with new experimental weapons, but even the designers spoke in hushed tones. One engineer was overheard saying, "It doesn't matter how big the fleet is if we can't see them before they strike." Back on Earth, Cade reviewed the latest intelligence from deep space scouts. The Zorath were shifting forces to defend core territories, pulling back from some outer systems entirely. It was a quiet victory. Those worlds would now be open to human influence without a single shot fired. But Cade was not complacent. She knew the Zorath were a proud and dangerous enemy, and that they would eventually come again. They will test us, she told her officers. And when they do, we will be ready, and they will find we've only grown stronger. Her words were not bravado, they were a statement of fact. Because even as the fleets returned home, the shipyards of Luna, Mars, and Titan burned with activity, new hulls taking shape under the glow of industrial forges, each one faster, deadlier, and smarter than the ships that had destroyed the Ninth Fleet. And yet, for all the building and planning, much of the Terran strategy remained in the shadows. Black Ops missions launched into deep space without official record, sleeper. Agents placed in Zorith trade hubs, hidden listening posts seated along their supply routes. This was not just war. It was the preparation for a future where Earth would never again be underestimated. In the end, there was no final speech, no loud declaration of dominance. Earth's next move was silence, the kind of silence that let the galaxy's imagination do the work. Silence that made every Zorith captain wonder if the next shadow on their sensors was a rock or a human warship preparing to strike. The Ninth Fleet had been destroyed, but its real legacy was the fear it left behind. A fear that stretched across star systems and into the minds of rulers and soldiers alike. And as that fear took root, Admiral Sarah Cade knew they had already won the most important battle, the one that would make every enemy think twice before ignoring Earth's final warning.